Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Hughes. I'm a Principal Solutions Engineer for Citrix. And today I'm with Sean Martineau from Mass General Brigham. Hello, Sean.
How you doing, Jake?
Doing well, doing well. Before we jump in, a little bit of housekeeping for those that are watching. If you have specific questions as we go through our presentation, please put them in the Q&A section on your interface. And towards the end of this session, we'll try to get as many questions answered as possible. Now, with that, Sean, why don't we start with an overview of your position with Mass General and kind of what the organization does, what it's about?
Sure. I'm the Senior Manager for Enterprise Delivery Services here at Mass General Brigham. We're basically responsible for application delivery for the enterprise. We provide delivery solutions over Citrix, virtual desktops, virtual apps, as well as SCCM and local deployments.
Excellent, excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about Mass General, kind of your service area, a little bit of sizing of the organization?
Sure. It's one of the largest network providers in the New England area. We're a very, very large Epic shop. Within our environment, we have about 10,000 VDAs, so virtual desktop agents that are made up of virtual app servers and virtual desktops, primarily virtual app servers, as we are delivering Epic over that solution. We have 3 production sites, all in the Citrix cloud. We support about 45,000 concurrent users, and we're supporting an application portfolio of about 1,800 plus applications.
Wow, that is not a small environment at all.
It is not.
Can you talk a little bit about your mix? You mentioned a mix of application servers and virtual desktops. Can you give us a little bit of background of what the use cases are for each one and how you choose?
Yeah, most of our environment is made up those application servers. So virtual app servers, everything is provisioning based. So we use provisioning services for, I would say, about 95% of our Citrix population. And that helps us kind of streamline. We're also a very big app layering shop. We'll probably now have the majority of our application portfolio using app layering, just really helps streamline dealing with a portfolio of this size.
Right.
Most of our applications find themselves into a virtual kind of app delivery solution. And that's primarily because we find a lot of density from multi-tenanting our applications. And virtual desktops are typically provided to kind of solutions that require that more personal type of engagement, where we have workflows and or user experiences that need to have that desktop-like interaction, where they're integrating with multiple applications, working with multiple apps, or they're in some type of remote capacity where a virtual desktop is going to add a more superior user experience over dealing with launching individual applications, say from Workspace.
Right, right, absolutely. And I would imagine your clinician population primarily uses the virtual apps, the published applications. Can you give us an idea of about how many clinicians do you have consuming the environment at any given time?
Our concurrency is in that 45,000, and that's a makeup of roughly about 34,000 coming from our Epic environment, Epic being our primary application.
Right.
All of the other apps that make up that portfolio, even though it's the significant majority of our portfolio. Those applications are consumed regularly, but they're not consumed throughout the day. So those applications are, users are going in and out of those apps. They're not opening it up and in it throughout the day or throughout their shift. Epic is one of our primary apps that you find is consumed, through that 8-hour shift or 9-hour shift or whatever it might be. Right. So the rest of the concurrency is made up of those remaining applications, and due to the shifts as well, since we're a 24-hour shop, some applications are driven by their consumption by the shift. So you could have some apps being used more on the weekends, some during the weekdays, some in the in the night shift versus the day shift. So there's a lot of variety, but that also comes back to why we have that kind of multi-tenant kind of strategy, where if you really kind of sliced and diced this, where every application was on its own server, you'd have a very expensive solution. But luckily, due to our ability to take advantage of application layering and take advantage of our multi-tenant strategy, we're able to really get some significant density. Some of our multi-tenant images have over 250 apps, all commingled, working together, no collisions, no issues, and it really provides a really streamlined and improved user experience because a lot of the apps are within that workflow. So those users are launching multiple applications that are within that multi-tenant space. And that's where they get those kind of improvements, right? That first time you launch, it's a little bit slower. The second time, third time, and fourth time you launch an application, it's almost like the application was installed locally.
Absolutely. And that's a great use of especially the app layering with the complexity that you guys have. Now, before we kind of transition into a vision and strategy and how this overall environment came about, can you speak a little bit to user experience and kind of what the perception within Mass General is from the user population that's primarily consuming it?
Sure. One thing we kind of do that's maybe a little unique to some of your other Citrix customers is we actually integrate our workspace through self-service into the start menu. So with Windows 10, the strategy was we really wanted to kind of get that out of the box feeling with Windows 10. We weren't at the position yet to kind of push our workforce to workspace. Now, granted, our remote workforce is obviously consuming most of their applications through workspace, but the majority of our users, before the pandemic hit, were obviously consuming their applications through their desktop. And as we pivoted through our strategy to take the majority of our apps over to Citrix and kind of take that Citrix first methodology, we didn't want them kind of positioned where local applications had to be launched through the start menu and Citrix applications had to be launched through the workspace. So using self-service and integrating it tightly into the operating system, it just provided that kind of seamless integration. So for us, that's the approach that we've taken. Users are able to just click on their Windows 10 start menu. We have folders designated for Citrix applications within that start menu. They can find it quickly. They can search for them, and it just shows up as if it was an application installed on their Windows 10 device. And they're consuming their applications natively that way. So outside of obviously seeing your traditional Citrix dialog box appear when you're launching an app, it seems native to them. They're launching their apps. There's that wait time, and the wait time is something we've put a lot of focus in. Our average launch time for applications is 12 seconds within our organization. That's something I'm proud to share, just because we put a lot of focus, a lot of the tension, especially now pivoting to moving our platform to the Citrix Cloud, has allowed us to put the focus on the apps and the user experience. So our attention is always on how long does it take to launch? Where can we bundle applications so that way we can take advantage of that second launch being, something that, involves session sharing where they can get that immediate opening versus that additional delay. So the sensitivity is around that.
That's fantastic, and obviously the sophistication of the environment that you have, the level of attention that you put into providing for the caregivers and your end users didn't come about overnight. So if we could take a step back and talk a little bit about the vision and the strategy and the objectives that really fed the journey and the path to determine that the Citrix Cloud was the right solution for you.
Sure. I mean, you kind of put it well. It's been a journey. This is something, 6 years in the making. Epic really was the driver to leverage, a Citrix platform to the level that we are doing here with a level of concurrency and the focus on user experience. That kind of allowed us to take that kind of same strategy and say, can we do this for the rest of our corporate applications? And that started flowing very naturally with our on-premise integration of Citrix. But with the Citrix Cloud, it obviously gave us some opportunities, especially in 2018 when we were kind of reviewing the concept of going to the Citrix Cloud and making sure it, kind of fit our needs. And then 2019 when we finally decided to take the leap of faith to go to the Citrix Cloud. A lot of that was around the agility and stability of the environment. And granted, it took time for the Citrix Cloud to get to something that we would feel would meet our service levels, and it's something that we could rely on and didn't have to have one leg in the cloud and one leg on-prem and still have some dependency on controllers and database servers. So it did take time, and we didn't move all our sites at once. We did move a single site first. Just wanted to kind of feel the waters, dip the toe, per se, in there, and measure things. And that came down to conversations around, well, will the cloud, due to latency, impact our application launch times? And did it? Sure, it did. It was minimal enough, though, and it allowed us to obviously focus back on how can we refine that even more to make up the difference. And we were able to make up that difference. So we were able to get ourselves back on target, back onto that average. And that's when we finally were comfortable enough to move Epic, being our largest of our concurrency. And that moves seamlessly. I can't stress enough. We moved Epic in a single night all over to the Citrix cloud seamlessly with active users, going from on-prem to the cloud and not missing a beat, no downtime. So it's very impressive. We've been on it ever since, and not needing to worry about our controllers, not needing to worry about database servers, not needing to worry about any type of interruption. Having the confidence in the localhost cache kind of configuration and everything else that your cloud connectors bring has really allowed us once again to kind of free ourselves from that kind of everyday engineering and support responsibility and really just focus on apps, desktops, and that user experience.
And I think that's critical. That's a key point, is where can your focus go when you're not chasing the infrastructure, right? And you mentioned in 2019 was when the vision and strategy started to come together. And then March 2020, and everything changed globally. The pandemic hit. Can you speak a little bit to how the agility and the capability that you built in over the past couple of years, how did that impact your response to COVID? And what did that look like for Mass General?
Sure. I mean, it was obviously a struggle for many. We were positioned well. I won't say we were obviously positioned perfectly. There were situations that we still needed to transition either applications over to Citrix or find better ways to accommodate the increase in remote workforce. We saw somewhere in the upwards of 300 to 400% increase in remote work. Obviously, for folks that needed to now completely change the day-to-day activities and now be 100% remote. Some of that was through VPN. We saw obviously increases on our VPN capacity. We also saw an increase in hits on just folks coming to workspace remotely. At that time, we were positioned with roughly about 80% of our application portfolio that we manage on Citrix. So we were in a very good shape there. The problem is that when we look at our portfolio of apps that I shared earlier, that's applications that we manage from an enterprise level. There are applications that users install on their devices. There are applications that the sites manage themselves. So there's a lot of additional complexity. And sadly, those were faced with challenges. The challenge of either through VPN having latency or working from home and their ISPs having challenges. So that drove the demand quickly to needing to be agile in delivering more applications through Citrix. So we found ourselves kind of at a crossroads where we had a large population of applications available to our users. Probably needed to communicate that, because even though applications were available in Citrix, now we had a population of users that are going to be 100% remote. Right. Going back to that kind of native experience, the integration in the start menu. Now it's critical if you want to continue that integration to have VPN, unless you have it configured to work with Workspace remotely, which we did not. So a VPN strategy was critical. Communication and education was critical. Making sure users knew how to access their applications, what was available on Workspace that could be 100% consumed remotely versus what was still required to have VPN access, even though we might have some applications in Citrix, because the applications themselves could be published content. They could have other dependencies on local applications that we might not fully appreciate at that time. So we were at this crossroads, dealing with pandemic, getting our workforce remote, and also at the same time needing to stand up a remote hospital. So there was a lot hitting this team, a lot hitting the organization, a lot hitting all the IS support teams. Boston Hope was one of the big challenges and focus for this team. And luckily for us, we were able to provide a solution to our entities to bring up Boston Hope very quickly. We were able to bring it up in days. And because of that, we were able to leverage technologies like thin clients and VDI to bring that, that site online quickly. And that was really due to where we were positioned. We didn't have to worry about spinning up infrastructure and worrying about scaling out, especially on-prem. We had the cloud. We had everything we needed there. We luckily had capacity online or on-site from a VDA perspective, but we also had the ability to flex in the cloud if we needed to. And that was the kind of the agility piece of having ourselves in the Citrix cloud, is this we had the moment to do that. And there, throughout the pandemic, especially the first few months, we were always constantly measuring, constantly gauging, when do we need to flex? When is it time to spin VDAs up in Azure? And luckily we never needed to, but we always had that in our back pockets. So having ourselves at a position where we had a very mature profile, portfolio of apps, having the ability to leverage other Citrix technologies to throw at the challenges that the pandemic was throwing at us, and also having the confidence that we could tap into other resources at any time really positioned us well. It's not over. We're still kind of dealing with the pandemic and the remote workforce and what the new norm is going to be. So it's definitely not at a position where we can say we're through it. But we continue to learn from this and continue to focus on that kind of Citrix first strategy. Embrace it almost even more. It's not a Citrix only. It's really just understanding our applications, getting into the DNA of the apps, and really appreciating how the apps are being consumed, what are their dependencies, and what solutions really match, so that we are positioned to continue having that kind of stability and agility we need going forward.
Right. And I have to tell you, Sean, something strikes me as you talk. Being from Citrix, we talk a lot about how Citrix Cloud frees you up to concentrate on other things that are important to the business. And every business has something that's more important or less important. But I think your story really hones in on the unexpected pandemic. You had headspace to really address the pandemic, really address scale, keep the user experience intact, and weave that fabric of solution that you're referring to for your end users to keep the organization functioning almost as if something wasn't happening from an infrastructure standpoint. I think that's a pretty powerful story. Now, obviously, transitioning to the cloud, as you mentioned, it's a big journey. You put a lot of thought into it. Is there something you can share with the audience about lessons learned, things that you learned along the way, things that you might do different or that you would emphasize others should do?
It's a great question. I think we're constantly learning. I can't say that we've gotten to that point that we can sit here and say we have the recipe for success. I think that recipe is almost something that's evergreen, right? You're just constantly modifying, constantly changing it, constantly adapting, because your users are adapting, your users are changing, the demand keeps changing. I think the way we positioned ourselves with the cloud, the way we addressed our kind of our customer space and tenanting ourselves, where we had not just one site, but multiple sites to address test, stage, and production for us, was definitely a lesson learned that we could probably share for other large organizations. If you're a small organization, having probably a single site or a single customer ID is enough. But when you're dealing with an entity of our size, dealing with the complexity of applications and VDAs, you have to almost take that kind of your domains intact, where you're kind of looking at it as you want to make sure your failure domains are extending as far out as even your cloud, cloud areas. There's a lot of things you can do within the Citrix cloud environment, obviously, to provide those kind of containers. But we wanted to take a step further. We wanted to really embrace, solutions that the Citrix Cloud had with when it came to canary release and current release and deferred release. And we really positioned ourselves well with our customer site IDs so that we could do just that. I know it's very agile in the cloud, and we don't want to get back to the old ways of that. We're saying don't make change, and we can't accept change. We have to obviously get in a position that we can constantly accept change, and change isn't your enemy anymore. It's more of embracing it and understanding how to be almost flexible enough that the change doesn't impact you. And this helped us get through that, seeing those changes kind of progress through our environment, giving us at least a little bit of time to adjust, test, verify things, and just continue to build that confidence.
And I think that's another important point. Just because we're shifting where infrastructure lives or who's managing it doesn't mean we change our processes. So dev, test, stage, prod, those things all still exist. And it's still incumbent on you as the technology professionals to run through those safety gates to make sure that you're providing the highest quality. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. Now, you've done a lot. You've crossed a lot of ground. We're still kind of in the pandemic piece. Where do you see, if we put get the crystal ball out and start looking into the future, where do you see the solution that you've got evolving? What do you see? I mean, obviously, everybody refers to it as the new norm. There's going to be a percentage of folks that continue to work remote. What does that look like in your space, and where do you see the technology evolution moving within your environment?
It's a great question. I think remote work is here to stay. What the percentages will be, what it'll look like when whatever the new norm is, and whenever it starts, or maybe it's starting now, maybe it's starting 6 months from now. I think it's a little different for everyone. I think we're embracing remote work. We have to. Another pandemic could happen. We need to be prepared. But as we look forward and kind of see how do we continue to mature? What do we do that allows us to continue to grow in the space or be more prepared? And I think things like embracing analytics is something, looking at what features are available to us. Obviously, continue putting that focus on applications and where that value is for migrating applications to Citrix. If there seems to be value there, continue honing in that user experience, maybe using performance analytics to help us get a better appreciation, especially once applications are live. Embracing analytics not only in a reactive way, but in a proactive way, where we're able to kind of look at our environment, see where there are problems, zero in on those, continue to mature, see if we can continue to bring down that average launch time, as well as a zero trust architecture. When you start thinking about growing your remote workforce, it really starts bringing security into the realm. Security has to be at that forefront. And Citrix is a very great enabler to a zero trust architecture. And as you know, that's a pretty hot topic nowadays. And it's definitely going to be within our discussions. It's already part of our discussions. But I definitely see that as being something that we're going to be embracing over the next year or two.
Yeah, and I love that. I look at it as refinement. So you've got the overall solution intact in place, and now you begin to leverage the components in the portfolio that allow you to refine it further and further and further until it is the most pristine user experience you can provide. Now, one area that we touched on your environment a little bit, an area that I know is on the minds of many of the viewers that we've got today is, how big is the staff that you have to support this large, sophisticated environment?
Sure. I get that question asked a lot. And the focus really isn't on, the team is about applications. It's not just Citrix. So, our team is roughly 15 FTEs. We do have some Citrix professional services as well. But that team is made up of Citrix engineers, which we have 3 Citrix engineers. We have 3 what we call support engineers, and they focus on the operational side of the house. They deal with Citrix issues, but they deal with all application issues. We have analysts on the team. We have packagers on the team for SCCM and local apps. But when I look at actual Citrix resources, it's small. And the reason why it's small and the reason why we're able to focus more on application engineers than Citrix engineers is really due to going back to Citrix Cloud. We're not building infrastructure. We're not really kind of worrying about the Citrix kind of aspects. We're more worried about the applications. And that's a pivot over the last, I would say, 5 years, where the team was probably made up of much more Citrix engineers and operational personnel. The team was really built around having Citrix being the core. And now it's more applications being the core. So we're able to kind of get, more breadth and depth out of building the team of analysts, building a team of operations people, and putting that kind of user experience first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but we talked about using public cloud along with Citrix Cloud in an earlier session today. You mentioned Azure a little bit today. Can you speak, as we're running up on time, can you speak a little bit to what is the forward-looking strategy of embracing the public cloud and really having Citrix Cloud side by side with public cloud resources?
Yeah, that's definitely in our conversations and our future strategy. Where do we start flexing? Where do we start leveraging those cloud resources beyond just the Citrix Cloud plane? I think VDI is one of the areas that we'll see be kind of where we explore first, and the reason for that is we look at our kind of remote workforce. We leverage areas that extend beyond just the New England. The borders. So, there's value in obviously taking advantage of some of those, Azure tenant spaces that can bring virtual desktops closer to the users consuming them, which will improve that user experience. So at first I see us obviously looking at virtual desktops in the cloud. Eventually applications and other solutions that we provide could easily find themselves into, the cloud domain, but a lot of that's going to come down to the applications themselves. Are they, when you kind of look at that, are they positioned well to adapt to the cloud? And that's not just Citrix. That, obviously, as you understand, it encompasses the complete application, stack. So we obviously have to look at that from top to bottom and really kind of make sure that we don't add latency to, the user experience when they're dealing with the client and the backend resources. As more and more applications are cloud-based, it makes more sense, obviously, to start bringing the client-facing components closer to the cloud because we're going to get, some advantages there. So over the next couple of years, I see things transitioning in that space, but virtual desktops are going to be probably our primary focus.
Yeah, it's back to that topic of refinement and really, to your point of bringing it closer to the user. How much better, how much more native can we get as the solution matures into the public cloud? Well, looking at time, it looks like we're hitting the end here. Sean, I can't tell you enough, the path that you and your team have forged, I hope is as valuable for the viewers today as it was for myself and the larger Citrix teams. We really appreciate you putting the time into telling us about it. And I look forward to checking in with you and seeing where it's gone in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.